Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well still today. Today, or now, for the second upload of the day, is going to be a subscriber interview. Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the descriptions below, my merch displayed directly under this video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Like I said, subscriber interview, I have been doing the state-by-state alphabetical subscriber submission, and I could not find this subscriber's encounter, so I figured, you know what's even better? Let's have him back on to share his encounter and what else he remembers, because since he has done the original upload, things have come to light, kind of like a refresher, I guess. So I hope you guys enjoy this. All right, guys. So when I did the Ohio encounters, I had made mention of an encounter that I had narrated with an interview that I had done, and I couldn't find the typed out paper that I had, and I didn't want to go off the top of my head because I knew I couldn't give this encounter any justice. So the subscriber, his name is Preston, reached out to me, and we are going to kind of go over his encounter that he had in Ohio. There are pictures involved in this, which will be in the video, and we will talk about throughout the video. So I am going to introduce everyone to Preston. Preston, how are you?
Hey, Jeff, how you doing, man? Good to be back again. How's everything been?
Everything's been wonderful. Thank you for asking. I hope everything's going well for you, and thanks for taking some time out of your day. Again, we had a conversation yesterday for a couple of hours, and we got kind of caught up in time and couldn't do it last night. So at least we got back together again to do it today, which is cool. I'm really thankful of that. So pretty much I'm going to hand the floor over to you. We'll talk about your first encounter and then some other things that you kind of told everybody about the first interview, that because when you think of Cleveland, Ohio, you don't think of woods and stuff like that, but there is woods in where you're around. So
Okay. Well, it's funny as I'm listening to you, trying to wing it by remembrance. I'm like, boy, he jacked it up. But it's good that my encounter was so unique that even when I'm hearing like terrible details, I can still tell it was my encounter. I guess what I really don't want to do is just go back in and just re-narrate what you already have an upload of. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
But just to kind of clarify a few things, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Cincinnati.
I'm currently living in Columbus, Ohio. So, like, everything from my encounters basically are taking place. Like my encounters, I speak about the Columbus area where I'm at. I speak about Dayton, where I was in training at for my job, and Circleville, Ohio, where my encounters take place. And I mentioned Cincinnati, but ironically, since then, because this upload was like over a year ago.
Yeah.
But since then, one of my fraternity brothers reached out to me up in Youngstown, Ohio, which is, might as well say Cleveland, but near Youngstown. And he sent me a which I sent you a picture of. So I guess when you upload this, they can maybe see it. But he actually sent me a picture of a paw print that he took in the snow, and it was basically almost identical to the footprint that I sent you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So just on another note, but basically, just I guess to introduce myself to those people who don't know, my name is Preston. I at the time of my encounter, I was a fuel truck driver. I delivered like diesel fuel and gasoline. So my encounter took place along one of my stops on one of my routes, and pretty much just to give you the 1 minute like version of it. I was already familiar with Dogman before my sightings. I'm just listening to different encounters and educating myself, and I initially saw a paw print, which I mean, one might argue. Now, let's just play this out like from the beginning. One may, I could have argued maybe like it was just one of the biggest dog prints that I've ever seen. There might be species of dogs that make prints that big, but considering where it was, I highly doubt it.
Right.
Because it was like, it was at a large stone quarry. They processed stone, they made blacktop and asphalt, asphalt blacktop and everything else at this place. So yeah, that's another story from the day. But so from the time that I saw my paw print to actually seeing the Dogman, it was probably maybe a month or so in between.
Now, the paw print that you're mentioning, is that the one that the photo next to the glove?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that one.
That glove is like a special kind of glove. It's large, made to kind of be loose on your hands. Can you kind of go into that photo and how you laid the glove down and what was going through your head?
Yeah, well, basically the story behind that picture, actually, that where I had my sighting, that was actually the first day that I had. Like, I was actually still in training, so I'm with the guy who was training me, so I'm running my route. Mm-hmm. And when I saw the paw print, that coincidentally was like the very first night that we went to that stop. So going back and giving a little like aftermath to that, the day it happened where we saw the paw print, it was so surreal. Like, cause me and this guy, we had been talking about like Dogman. I was educating him on the subject as far as for the things I knew. So to see that footprint, that paw print, it was almost. It wasn't one; it was a set of them. Like a trail walking or running, whatever. But for me to see that, like, it was almost like surreal. Right. And the next day, I actually asked the guy, like, was that like, you just roasting the new guy, or you get playing a joke with the new guy or whatever? Because it just almost seemed like, considering what we had been talking about, for me to just for that to just bam, here it is. It almost seemed like, okay, you're actually playing a joke on the new guy, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, I pump oil. I pump fuel. I don't do stand up. He's like, I'm not that creative. Like, it was what it was. And he's like I told you yesterday, don't go there at night. If you get a late start in the day and you can't make that your first stop when it's, when the sun is still out, don't go. And like I mentioned in my, my original encounter, like, for him to tell me that, he didn't have to tell me twice. He probably didn't have to tell me at all. But, given the fact that the guy who's training me is telling me, like, hey, if it's dark, don't go deliver this 1,000 to 1,500 gallons of fuel that this company needs. You know, like I mentioned, like this wasn't driving Uber, and not to disrespect Uber or nothing, but like, I mean, this is money. This is fuel.
Yeah.
You know, this is like 1,000, 1,500 gallons per stop. And there was a couple of times they didn't get their fuel till either Tuesday. You know, I had to go there twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday. So there'd be times like, they wouldn't. If missed a Tuesday, they wouldn't get it till Thursday, or if they missed or if it was dark, I didn't go on Thursday, they wouldn't get it till next Tuesday. It was just, it was just like that. But looking back at it, one of the funny, what I find unusual now is that the times where I didn't deliver fuel, there was never any blowback. Meaning, like, there was never a phone call. Right. I never got a phone call from my company.
Like, where's my fuel? Why didn't this guy come and deliver?
Exactly. There was never, ever any, like, repercussions. And it wasn't until, like, it was summer, like summer, like June or so, that I actually start seeing people, like, working. Like, usually industries like this is like an offshoot of mining, like dredging and quarrying.
Mm-hmm.
That's potentially a 24-hour day job.
Yeah, that's year round, 24/7.
Usually you'll have like 2 rotating 12-hour shifts, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the fact that, number one, they didn't have a night shift, so which means they didn't work, like two 12-hour shifts. And the fact that 9 times out of 10, by the time I got there, it would be, for the first 2 or 3 months that I would deliver fuel, this is even before and after I had my sighting, there was nobody working. Which, like construction, you don't waste daylight. You don't waste time. You just don't do that.
Right.
And all the things, like in hindsight that I look back, one of those things is thinking like, man, maybe they knew something I didn't, because like there was never anybody. It's like they weren't going to get caught close to sundown. Like they would be, wrapping things up. Like, it's ample amount of daylight left.
Right.
That's just one of the things that I think back in retrospect.
So like nighttime's coming. Let's say nighttime's like 6 o'clock. They're wrapping up at like 4, getting ready to just be out of there.
Right. Exactly. So like I said, like since my actual sighting happened like February. No, it was March. So from March to, I would say, April, May, damn near June, I wouldn't see anybody. Like, it wasn't until, like, it started getting late, like 8, 9 o'clock, that I would even see anybody still there about 5 o'clock, 5, 6 o'clock when I was there. I just found that, like, very
strange.
Very, very strange.
Yeah.
Let's see. I want to kind of, if I want to talk about anything, I'm trying to search my brain, because one thing I did earlier today is I went back and I actually listened to my encounter, because I didn't want to. I want to kind of mention things that I did mention that in my encounter, maybe like aftermath, some things about the aftermath, and one interesting thing that happened. I was making a fuel delivery up in London, Ohio. Okay, months later, I was making a fuel delivery in London, Ohio, to this gentleman. He had a nice little spread, so I ended up having to deliver fuel like 3 separate locations on his property. One of the locations he had was a small log cabin, but it was a very nice little cabin, right? So I think he had like a wood burning stove or something on the inside. But anyway, I had to go on the inside to fuel the tank. So we're talking, and so he tells me that he's this older gentleman. He's like about 70 or so. So he tells me that he's been a trapper like 50 years. And I had no reason to doubt him, considering he had on the wall, he probably had about, I'd say about 15 coyote pelts, like minimum, just hanging on, among other things, hanging on the wall.
Right.
So we were talking, and I basically laid my story out to him, right? So he's just listening, and then I kind of explained to him like what it was. So he's like, huh. So when I took my phone out and I showed him the first picture I showed him was the one on the roof. So he's like, I'll be darned. That was his own reaction. Now, when I showed him the actual paw print with the glove next to it, boy, this old guy literally snatched my phone out of my hand, and was just looking with his mouth hanging open, scratching his head, like lifting his hat up, scratching his head with the other.
Yeah.
And what he told me was this. He's like, young man, he's like, you can see by the wall, I've been trapping and hunting for over 50 years. And he was like, I'm glad that we had this conversation today, because he was like, I had no idea these things were out here. And I was like, you believe me? I'm like, oh, you believe me then? He's like, I have no choice but to believe you. He's like, the proof's in it. He's like, I know what tracks look like. And I'm actually, it's funny, since I was at a stop, I was actually wearing my gloves.
Right.
I had them in my hand, so he could look at the glove and gauge perfectly, like, okay, the proportions of the print. And he said, he made a couple of observations. When he said that, he was like, you wouldn't have to tell me that this thing was walking on two feet or bipedally. I can tell by looking at the paw print.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, it's not the size of the print per se that I'm looking at, but he's like, it's the spread of the toes. He's like, canines don't spread the toes apart like that. Like, the only way you can even get a dog's foot to even closely resemble that is if they jumped up on their hind legs.
Yeah, and they're putting their front legs on your shoulders or something. Then they spread out like that. Yeah.
He said that he's like, the toes would naturally spread apart like that to bear the weight of the body. He's like, plus, he's like, you can look and see wherever it was. He pointed out that when it stepped down, it stepped down almost with the force. Have you ever seen the process of pile driving?
Yeah.
Okay, if you ever seen like a hydraulic pile driver working,
yep.
Right? If you notice that the first couple of strikes, what happens? The concussion from the pole getting hit goes through the pole out to the ground, and it makes almost like a mushroom.
Yeah.
From the actual concussion of the strike. So he's like, you can see where this thing came down so hard, it displaced all the mud around it. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh shit. I didn't notice that. He's like, yeah. He looks. You would have to. He's like, I can tell that this is a canine. He's like the biggest canine I've ever seen walking on 2 feet. Hmm. So it's like, had I never seen what I saw, I would be deferring to a person anyway who had over 50 years of outdoor experience.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, so either way it goes, right? That was just an interesting, follow up.
Yeah.
One of the follow ups. I just.
Now, really quick,
okay,
can you kind of fill in the blank? Because some people are listening, going, "What is that roof that you're talking about?"
Okay. I drove a field truck, and so 2 nights a week in at a stone quarry, but basically you go to Circleville and turn left. So it's like either Circleville or like the outskirts of Circleville, but definitely here or there. But 2 nights a week, I had a field stop at a large stone quarry, and they had 3 diesel fuel tanks, like in-ground diesel fuel tanks that would take anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 gallons total to fill all 3 tanks. So twice a week, I'll have to go down to this place that was like in the middle of nowhere, freaking nowhere, and between a half hour, like if I was lucky, I'd be in and out of there like half hour. Normally, it was more like 45 minutes, close to an hour. I would have to go and basically like physically stand there and just wait for for my truck to pump the allotted gallons of fuel. Okay, so like I said, the first day the very first time I went there, not being ignorant to what to the Dogman phenomenon, I see a oversized paw print. So at this point, I know that they're around. They're there somewhere. Mm-hmm. So with that knowledge, I'm there every day, like looking around, just looking around, because there was a wood line straight ahead from where I stood to fill these tanks. They were enclosed in concrete. So basically, I would be standing on top of what looks like a concrete slab, but it's like they're concrete enclosures for these fuel tanks. So I would be standing on top of there, like just looking out into the wood line. But there was a portion that would be like where my view was obstructed, so I never even looked in that area. That's where the Dogman was checking me out at, like in the very spot that I never looked. Right. So, but I would say I always had the feeling that I was being watched. So when I actually saw it, I wasn't surprised. Like, okay, there it is. And I took the corresponding pictures because it was literally sitting on a roof. And, and let me, as I've seen a lot of photographic, like a lot of photographs of, Bigfoot and Dogman and prints and all this. And you know what? I like to pat myself on the back, like in terms of like the picture of the paw print.
Yeah.
That's one of the clearest pictures I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
With something to give it scale.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And in terms of the actual Dogman photo, it's like the only thing, if it was obviously a little bit more, clarity, crystal clarity, like that would have been better. But I think that my Dogman photo is one of the most compelling, if nothing else, because of where it was. That, okay, like it obviously wasn't a hoax or Photoshop or a man in a suit, right? Oh, yeah, person could say that. But it's like, okay, if I was going to hoax, let's just say like if a person wants to try to go with the hoax theory, right, or whatever. Name one person that like who thinks like that, like, oh, okay, I'm going to stage this, right? And unlike every other person who's trying to stage something fake, I'm not going to do it in this wooded area, like right in front of me. Hey, go up on that roof of this grain storage building, like, and don't kill yourself on the way up, by the way. Like, get up there, don't die, and then let's take this picture.
Yeah.
But that alone, it's like, I've never seen a picture of any cryptid on a structure.
Right.
Yeah. Like a roof. Like that stands out.
Height advantage on you, and going back to what you said, like, you're working during this time. You're at someone else's property when you're taking this picture. You're on the clock. So you're not, you're not hoaxing anybody. Also, this is years ago, so what you're seeing something, you're taking that picture. You're not thinking, hey, in 10 years, I'm going to talk about this on a YouTube channel. There's, you're just like, holy crap, I knew these things were out there. Now I've got some, evidence. I've got this paw print. I've got this thing on the roof, you know.
Well, and if people go back and listen to the encounter, they'll like. I didn't even. It's a combination of a couple of things. One, how the mind works, how you try to process what you know. Now, it's funny. I was actively every week, every time I'm there, I'm actively looking for the Dogman. I'm actively looking for it.
Yeah.
Right. I'm that's what I'm doing. But because I saw it in a space that I didn't expect it to be, like, okay, back up for a minute. Like, this shit had me shook up before the paw print, right? So I made sure every time I was at that stop, I was on the phone with someone, right? And that day, as a matter of fact, the person I was on the phone with is the person whose encounters I relate in the part 2 of my encounter story, right? So, I mean, that's how real it was for me. Like, I didn't know if that was going to be my last time there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, I was but the mind works crazy. I'm looking right at this thing, and I thought it was a bird. I told my friend, I'm like, that's my exact words were, "Oh, that's great." And she's like, "What?" I'm like, not only do I have to worry about Dogman, but I'm looking at the biggest bird I've ever seen in my life. Because I wasn't expecting a Dogman to be perched on top of a roof. Right. Birds perched on top of roofs. But I'm joking. I'm like, no, you're not hearing me. I'm like, this thing it's the biggest bird. It's bigger than me. So she's laughing. I'm like, see, you don't believe me. I'm like, let me let you go. I'm about to leave anyway. Let me take a couple of pictures. It wasn't until after I didn't even know what I was taking pictures of. I thought it was a big bird. And it moved a couple of times. And when it stood up, I'm like, that's not a fucking bird. I put my glasses on, seeing exactly what it was. And it was basically looking back at me exactly how I was looking at it. Like, oh shit, like, it was looking at me more of like wondering if I could see it. Like, can he see me? And that's just the vibe that I got. I mean, so I didn't even realize what I was looking at when I was taking the pictures. I put my glasses on, and then everything came into focus.
A little clarity, yeah. Now, I don't think I mentioned this on any of the 2 videos that we did prior, but this is your first Dogman encounter, but you had also mentioned that you had knew about Dogman prior. So what got you into knowing, or what kind of led you down the path of looking and researching Dogmen prior to having your first encounter?
Okay. Quite simply, it just kind of fell in my lap because I was, like you said, I was already looking for answers, which I will tell you, and it fell in my lap. As I explained, like, I'm from Cincinnati, and I moved to Columbus, I went to Ohio State and all that shit. So I settled down in Columbus for a while. I moved back to Cincinnati in like 97. In 97. I moved back to the same community that I grew up in. And I noticed, like, all of a sudden, our community, like, we're inundated by deer all of a sudden. Like all of a sudden, we have this huge deer population. So, I'm explaining it. And at one point, when I got custody of my son, like, I had already explained it to myself. So I'm explaining to him, like, the reason why we have so many urban deer now is because shrinking habitat and, we're developing and then it just didn't really make, as I really thought about that. And I really started thinking about it realistically that, we're borderline arrogant as people. Like, we think that the cities are really bigger than what they are. Like, once we leave our major population centers in the United States, anywhere you go, baby, it's you ain't talking about wide open country or heavy you're either talking about like heavily forested areas to farmland. But what I'm getting at is like once you leave the city, there ain't shit till you get to the next city.
Right.
So a deer would just keep going out. So then I started it just made sense. Like, well, there might be something out there that the deer fear them more than they fear us. Because I already noticed, like during hunting season, you get an influx of deer come into your more urban areas,
mm-hmm. getting
away from hunters.
Yeah.
I already noticed that. That's what deer do. But when I just noticed, like there is a tremendous amount of deer, So and there was other things, that I had already noticed, like around where my mom lives at. I would notice like there was always the smell of like roadkill and wet dog, right? So you never I just never put the two and two together. Other than when I don't know how it could have been like on coast to coast or maybe something like that, but it was. Matter of fact, it was on coast to coast and. Dark Waters was on there, and he gave us an interview and everything, and then I ended up listening to the Siege of Lockett Ranch, right? So basically, and I still didn't put it together like at first, like okay, so there were I'm like, so first I got introduced, like makes sense, like I know there's Sasquatch, so makes sense, Dogman, right?
Right.
I'm like. Putting all the pieces together, art imitates life. Yeah, they don't just get these models, like from Underworld and shit, like from nowhere. So I'm like, it made sense. But like, kind of like with Sasquatch, all the early encounters and everything that I heard about Dogman, it was always like a down south like phenomenon. So I'm thinking like, down south, Louisiana. Mississippi, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like most people, like when you first started hearing about the Bigfoot phenomenon, most people assumed it was like a Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, Washington
phenomenon.
And stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So my good buddy, I want to give a shout out to Jody Cook. Just talked to him a couple weeks ago, as a matter of fact. I don't know where it was, but I heard an interview with Jody Cook. So I'm sitting back listening to it, like, okay, I'm like, sounds like he knows what he's talking about. And then during the interview, he mentioned that he was born and raised and still lives in Cincinnati. So I'm like, huh. So went on Facebook, reached out, found him on Facebook. So, Jody's a good guy, man. He's solid. Jody's fucking solid, man. He's a solid dude. So reached out to him on Facebook, gave my number. He called me back. So we had a good conversation. So he gave me a crash course and educated me on Dogman. And he was like, yeah, most likely, because I told him the area my mom lived in. And he's like, yeah, it checks all the boxes. He said something to this day. It kind of just, whenever I kind of gives me goosebumps knowing what I know now. But he said something to me. A statement, and I still hear him saying it. He goes, Preston, Ohio is infested with Dogman. And it just gives me goosebumps like every time I hear that statement because the way he said it, and it's very true. So let me see. That's how I got introduced to the phenomenon. Like, okay. I was looking for answers, just like, well, we got so much deer running around, like around my area. And it got answered. Now, I got some fresh information for you.
All right.
Like kind of a fresh update.
Well, because now you have time. You have time. You're retired now, and you've pretty much dedicated a lot of your time to doing research on these things, right?
Yeah, and this update that I'm gonna give you is only about 2 hours. It's about an hour and a half old. It's fresh.
Okay.
Now, um, she may even hear me, or she may even recognize herself. But when I gave my first encounter, going back to the comment sections, there was a lady who made a comment, and I didn't respond, but okay, a lady made a comment, said she was, I forgot how old she was. She was an older lady, and well, okay, my mom lives in an area called Silverton. Anybody from Cincinnati or wherever will know what I'm talking about. Okay, my mom lives in an area called Silverton. Bordering, like the next neighborhood bordering Silverton is a community called Kennedy Heights. That's actually where I grew up. And so my mom basically moved like from Kennedy Heights to the next neighborhood over, Silverton. But I never mentioned Kennedy Heights or anything in my upload, right?
Right.
So the lady made she commented like, oh my, she like what she knew, and she said like, wow. She's like, I forgot what year it was, but she said back in the '60s. She's like, I was living in Kennedy Heights, and she said either her or her mother basically saw a dog man looking through their kitchen window, and that it wasn't. This wasn't any like BS, like where the police were called and a report was made, right? Now, I don't know why I didn't think of it then, but as guys, my witness, when I'm listening back to my encounter, I remembered that, right? I remember that comment I just read. And I'm just like, damn, like I could never follow that up. And I'm thinking like, okay, that could be easily verified. So I have a cousin, like like one of my cousins, 11 years older than me, who actually grew up on the same street as me, right? I just texted him. I was like, cause like this might sound crazy, but coming from me, you just humor me. I'm doing some research. Back in the '60s, like late '60s, did you ever hear anything about a werewolf being seen in our neighborhood, and there was and the police being involved, right? So, like less than 2 minutes later, I get a phone call back from my cousin. And he's like, damn, cuz, he's like, you jogged my memory. He was like, he's like, the funny part about it was like, you were like a baby, man. He's like, if I'm not mistaken, it was either the year before you were born or the year you were born. He's like, I'm like, you remember? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm about to break everything down. I'm about to tell you shit that you probably don't know. I'm like, go ahead. He's like, okay. Like, how it was when we were growing up, like, we were always in the fucking woods, like everywhere in the neighborhood. We were just either riding bikes, building tree forts. We just were in the freaking woods.
Right.
So I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, there was always like kids always come to school saying that they seen a werewolf. Like, but we was kids. But he's like, I'm gonna tell you something. He was like, I think about that from time to time. He's like, and he's like, it was always the same kids. And they never, he's like, they always, because he's like, it's not like they got any props from it. Like, they were always like, like we teased them, but they stuck to it. And he was like, it wasn't until that shit came on the news, then they say werewolf, they said a large black wolf was seen looking in a lady's window, right? He's like, after we heard that, like, the kids were coming to school, like, man, we told you, like, we wasn't lying.
Right.
So then he's like, then after that, he's like, everybody starts seeing it. I was like, really? He was like, yeah, but he was like, do you remember you remember your grandmother's dog, Duke? And now I have a very good memory. Like, I'll remember shit. Like, and when he said that, I'm like, damn, I remember that. He's like, you remember whatever happened to Duke? I was like, no, what? Listen to this shit, Jeff. My grandmother, who at the time lived literally like the house next door to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
She had a black Great Dane named Duke, right?
Okay.
And my cousin was like, yo, Pete, your grandmother ended up having to have that dog put down because they started getting reports from neighbors that her dog was looking at people's window at night.
Oh,
but if you know your, she's like, but if you know your grandmother, I said it's a sense for. I'm like, my grandmother didn't keep her dogs out. She was an old lady. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the dogs were her. She had 3 dogs. She had a big ass German Shepherd, a collie, and that goddamn Great Dane. You know what I'm saying? And they were her children. They weren't outside, like unless she was outside. They were in the house with her.
Right.
And I don't know like what type of pressure or whatever, but she ended up having to put Duke down because I my cousin said that a dog ended up getting killed and they blamed it on Duke.
Mm.
And that's one of the reasons I think like my grandmother that messed her up. She was so pissed off. She ended up moving to Kentucky like when I was a child. And I'm thinking that was one of the reasons. But it's like, you know, I swear to God, Jeff, like anything that I ever tell you is the God's honest truth. I can't make this shit up.
Right.
You know, and it's like this kind of brings up like, you know, ask questions. Like ask questions to your older like relatives. You know, like things that you think you may have seen as a child. You never know. You may have seen that shit for real.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's true. You start asking questions. Like, I just recently, started kind of asking questions. Me and my dad were doing something this summer, and we started talking about something completely off topic of cryptids. And we got on the subject of this old guy that, lived by himself. He was a hermit, but he wasn't a hermit. You know what I mean? He had money. He was wealthy, but he lived by himself out in the, he had a nice house that he built, but lived by himself. And he did a lot of work outside. And my dad said this guy always, would come in to there used to be a small little store, and he'd say, I feel like something's watching me out in the woods and this and that. And, and people just kind of brushed it off because that he was just an old guy that lived by himself. So they probably thought he was crazy, but chances are there was something really watching the poor guy out in the woods.
You know, it's there's a reoccurring theme that I hear from encounters, and this is something that I want to say to like all parents, like small children.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, and the ones you need to listen to the most are the ones who can articulate themselves the least, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
Like the younger, because it's like just like any other, just like most canines. If you notice, like domestic, there's something about babies and the youth that animals a lot of times react differently. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And they children sometimes activate their nurturing instinct, not their predatory instinct. And with canines, it's little children. Dogs love children. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They look at them as little pack members. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And there's no more excitement than you see a big dog going losing his shit over a fucking child. You know what I mean? So, I've heard so many accounts now of children, like, basically telling their parents, like, what they're seeing, but they have to speak in language they can relate with. But they'll be telling, like, hey, doggy's in the window. Doggy comes sees me at night. Wolfie's in the window. I heard this one encounter where the child was calling whatever it was, she was comparing it to the werewolf from Hotel Transylvania and calling it by name. You know what I mean? So it's like children, like, and you hear all these encounters that, like, when a parent or something will finally have their own account, they're like, my God, like, my child had been telling me for years sometimes that, I got a friend that comes sees me at night.
Yeah, two and two makes sense then. Two and two makes sense then. Yeah, I agree. So, I agree. Kids are, I think as adults, we forget that we were kids at one time, and we are, as children, whether it be Dogman, Bigfoot, any kind of paranormal is drawn to children because they're still pure, and all, like when you said the ones that don't articulate, they don't know how to lie yet. They haven't learned to lie. So, I think we forgot that we got blown off as kids when we saw something or something was strange to us, and we just continued that pattern. And you're absolutely right. Little kids should be kind of taken at their word because they don't know how to lie, until they're at a certain age. But you're absolutely correct. Thank you for bringing that valid point up. I appreciate that.
And I'm gonna add to that by saying one thing. Like, the term is used with children is, oh, that child has an active imagination. People have to understand, like, at that age, right? Even if a child has a active, quote unquote, imagination, their imagination is based off of something that they see and they expound from it.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like, but they don't just make up shit, like, and Lord of the Rings shit. Like, their imagination is basically they're acting out what they know, what they see, and what they learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're not old enough to make up shit yet. Like, they're just replaying what they've seen or what they've learned.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100% with you on that. I do. Yeah. That's pretty crazy that your grandmother's dog, being a big, dark-colored Great Dane, was used as like a scapegoat for what was really, looking through people's windows and taking out small animals. That's sad.
And it's like, what's just boggling my mind is like how potentially close I've been to this, like, my entire life and never knew it. Like this, like a potential, like, story like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's been running, and I never freaking knew it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I remember my mom's Great Dane, and I'm thinking, like, there would be nights, like, the way our house was set up, like, I can remember, like, being in my high chair in the dining room, right? And the way my high chair would be set up at the dining room table, just back in the good old days when families ate as a family,
yep.
At the dinner table. So I can remember, like, my high chair would be set up like in the dining room table, and my view would be like through the kitchen, out this kitchen window facing my grandmother's house, right? And at night, like, I would see, quote unquote, Duke walking by my fucking window.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes he'd be walking by the kitchen window. Looking back at it now, like, I don't, even then, like, as I was older, I would like, damn, like, I would just go back and think, like, how big was Duke? Because I remember him trotting. I would see him walk by our kitchen window every night, or, that one kitchen window.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back, like,
Duke was big.
Damn, right, but, as I'm looking back at it now, like, Duke would have literally had to be a horse.
Yeah.
Like, for him to be looking to an 8-foot window.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, your grandmother, Duke, and the other two dogs were your grandmother's children. Duke was inside with grandma, like.
Right.
That's
right.
Yeah. So, and Great Danes are big. They're big, but they aren't that big, like you just said, to go and look through a window. Maybe if they're standing and they jump up, but you're going to hear that noise if they're putting their paws on your windowsill. You know,
Right.
a dog man doesn't have to put the paws on the windowsill because it doesn't need to balance itself because it can stand up.
You know, and you know what? Unfortunately for Duke, what I remember about Duke is he did have cropped ears.
Mm.
My grandmother did. My grandmother did have his ears cropped.
Mm.
So if you think about the description, like if I even think about what a dog man looks like, you know what I mean? They're, at least the one that I saw, the thing that stood out the most was one of the things that stood out was his muzzle. A huge, like a dog muzzle the size of a horse mouth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so I mean, it's very distinctive, and like, unfortunately, like Great Danes have distinct features about them. They have a real long muzzle, and if you crop their ears, poor Duke was a victim of maybe misidentification. Because my grandmother went to her grave like she moved because of that shit.
Mm.
She sold her house and moved to Kentucky after she had to put Duke down. I remember that.
Yeah, that's sad. It's unfortunately it happens more times than we know, misidentification. You know, and like me and you were talking last night, because you and I had a great talk last night about a lot.
Yeah, we always do.
But
yeah,
we talked about misidentification and, you know, back in the day when people weren't talking about Dogman, there was misidentification of Sasquatch, people thinking they're seeing Sasquatch when they're seeing a real Dogman and stuff like that. Misidentification is a big factor in cryptozoology, unfortunately. Our eyes play tricks on us sometimes.
That was one. I'd like you to mention like the theory about the Jersey Devil, man.
Yeah.
In terms of misidentification, like even the flying thing, bro.
Yeah.
You need to share that real
I will.
quick,
I'll
man.
do that right now if you don't mind, real quick. So I was telling Preston I had recently been talking to a gentleman who he's written a couple books about the Jersey Devil and the Leeds family of the Pine Barrens, and I'm setting up to interview with him real soon. But we were talking, and he sent me back a message, and he said, "I'm listening to your channel now." He goes, "I've been doing this for 40 something years," and this is a guy who has written music about the dog or the Jersey Devil and the Leeds family, the curse and stuff like that, how scary the Pine Barrens are. And he goes, "I never heard of the Dogman this whole time." And then he sends me another message back, and he goes, "Jeff," he goes, "I think that people may be seeing what they think is the Jersey Devil, but are seeing a dog man." He goes, "Because people say the Jersey Devil has this horse looking like face. It's 9 feet tall." And he goes, "It can fly though. That's the contributing or the factor that kind of eliminates that." But then I said, "Well, dogmen jump and they run through trees. So if you see a creature that can jump 20 feet straight in the air into a tree and then just start running through the top of the trees like without an issue, that would almost give it the appearance to fly." And this guy was blown away. And he's studied this for, not dogmen, but the Pine Barrens and the legends of the Pine Barrens. And it was really cool to, just put an idea into his head, and to him be open-minded enough to where he was willing to look at it, because he's been studying it for so long. And usually people have been studying things so long, they become closed-minded, but he definitely wasn't. And it was very interesting. Thanks for bringing that up. It was cool though. Yeah, it was crazy. And then you said they run through trees, and that gives the appearance to fly.
Well, let me just take it a little bit further than that. Okay, let's just say that that the that the Jersey, let's just call him the Jersey Dogman, right? What if he's a species of dogman with a specific adaptation? What if, one thing I think, like with the whole Sasquatch and Bigfoot phenomenon, is nobody's wrong.
Yeah.
I think everybody's right, and they're right in reference to what they're seeing.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So what if the Jersey Devil, hypothetically, is a dog man with a adaptation like that of a flying squirrel?
Yeah. Good call. Good call. Anything is possible. Anything's possible. I mean, we don't know what the Mothman is. We're just making assumptions of what that is, so we don't know how that creature flies or what it is. So yeah, and if you think about how people talk about the Mothman, it almost has like the flying squirrel appendage, like, you know what I'm saying? You're keying on yeah, good point.
And I want to say something like, this is an example, like, of who you are, Jeff, and what your channel is, and what I've actually seen it evolve into. I respect you, and what I like the most about you is that you're not closed-minded and you think outside the box, and you bring forth questions. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you're not afraid to say, like, hey, we don't know what's going on, so let's try to find out some answers together.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I respect about you is nothing's off the table, and nothing should be off the table because we don't know anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. A lot of people, there's, unfortunately, I'm not naming names, and I'm not saying any, because, there are a lot of people that have great ideas, great researchers and stuff. But, if you had brought up that subject of maybe they have evolved, people get scoffed at for having theories when there's no definite answer. We don't have a definite answer of anything on these things. So, like you just said, everyone is right because it's just theory right now, and it all adds up together. Eventually we'll get some sort of answer. I honestly and unfortunately don't think we'll ever get 100% the answers that we want, but I'd be good with 30% of my questions getting answered.
Right. It's and there's another thing too I want to say to people out there is, there are some people that, based on what I've heard and who I've actually spoken to, like, personally, that are very knowledgeable. But there are no such thing as experts.
Yep.
And those who have had encounters will know what I'm talking about. But I just want to for those people who are like me, who saw something, you don't know what you saw, so you stumbled upon this, and you're here, right? And you're looking for answers. I just want to caution everybody to if nothing, like, at the end of the day, no matter what you hear from a so-called expert or whatever about behavior or whatever, trust your gut at the end of the day. Because, and that's why, like, there's a certain, there's a couple of knowledgeable people that, yeah, I put a stamp on what they say. Like, yeah, you can listen to this person. Because, and this is for anybody who might be, touting himself as an expert or whatever. Be careful what you say. And be careful what you're out here telling people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? because your information could be potentially
dangerous,
life-saving, or life-threatening or ending information that you give to people.
Yeah.
Because this shit is real. It really is.
Yep. Yeah, I was just making that exact comment. I was talking to, because my mom and I were talking about paranormal, and she kind of said something about, I think we were talking about Ghost Hunters, the TV show, and how they consider the person who runs that show a quote unquote expert. And I'm like, well, I go, how is that person an expert? I'm like, he knows what we know. He's seen what we've seen. He might see more, but he doesn't know all the answers. He just has a little more experience than we do, at some of these things, or just a little bit more information. That doesn't qualify that person as an expert. I don't think there is, when you say expert, I don't think that word really can fit anywhere.
Right, exactly. Now we're all, like I say, you can't be an expert on something that by and large the world doesn't accept as existing. You can't be an expert on nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're not classified as being real.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Or so you can't be an expert on something that don't fucking exist. You just can't.
Yeah.
Like, and there are no experts when it comes to, I don't want to disrespect them by saying wild animals, but nature. Like, there is no 100% certainty. Like, I don't care if you've been studying a pack of wolves for 30 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
The research that you have developed may carry over, but most of it is specific to that pack.
Yeah.
The behavior of that pack. So you may be an expert on that pack, but there is no standard book on wolf behavior, or animal behavior. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't exist.
Like Jane, what is that? Jane Goodall, is that her name? The woman who,
right?
She is considered not an expert, but she is considered, a very, very highly respected researcher. I don't think I've ever heard anyone call her an expert. I've just heard highly respected researcher. And I think she put that term on herself because, like you said, she sat with, these silverback gorillas for, X amount of years and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
But she only knew what she knew about that group. She didn't sit with every single group of gorilla out there. She's just a highly respected expert with theories on nature. And there is no expert in nature because nature is continuously changing. It's there's just really good, smart people out there who are willing to take in theories of different people's, like with your theory on the flying squirrel thing. I literally jotted that down on a piece of paper, because I never thought about it like that, and that's, I'm taking that one and adding it to the collection of theories because that's a good goddamn theory.
Yeah, I mean, it's as good as it. Until proven wrongs, let's go with, what I'm saying, just throw it in the hat with everything else.
Yeah.
And let's try to, by process of elimination.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And what's left, no matter how improbable, is the truth.
Yep. And we were talking about a person last night who's very intelligent. Randall Carlson. He doesn't consider himself an expert. He's just a researcher, a very intelligent person, but not an expert. And he'll be. I've heard interviews with him saying, I'm not an expert, and taking other people's theories and adding it to his and researching and this and that. Yeah, it's definitely a word that shouldn't belong.
When you commit yourself to learning. When you recite what you know or what you learned,
Mm-hmm.
you probably will sound like an expert. You know what I mean? But it's ever evolving. Like I had a rule. I literally have a rule. Most of my adult life, I live by a rule that I want to learn something new every day.
Yep.
You know, so if you're constantly learning, man, look at your mental library that you get to accumulate.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
You're
know,
almost like a student of education.
Yeah, you know, so I'm just always willing to learn, and it's like you got to be, you know, seeing something like this gives you no choice. Well, no. I can't understand how a person who has seen any cryptid can be closed-minded about any other cryptid or any other thing. Like, once you've already seen the impossible or the what's not supposed to exist, the door is open for everything else that's not supposed to exist. You know, and I think it's disrespectful for a person who is a true believer because they've seen, like, say, Sasquatch, to discount the existence of Dogman.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
And unfortunately, that happens, and that's scary. When people, like, you know, who are highly respected in the research community of Sasquatch can downplay Dogmen, and I've seen it many times, but yet they can, you know, admit the existence of Bigfoot, but not admit the existence of Dogman, or paranormal people admit the existence of spirits, but not recognize Bigfoot. You know, it makes no sense. You're willing to accept one thing, why can't you accept it all? No matter how out of the box it may seem. You know, we live in a really strange world. You know, like there's no telling how far things go and how deep things really are. So
yeah, you know, and I'm going to tell you something that I trust. I trust the source that I got this information from. There's something that we talk like when we originally started talking off the, a year ago. I didn't bring this up on purpose, like during my encounter. I'm gonna just make a brief reference to it, and this probably jog your memory. But and I trust the source and the story behind it. There's no doubt in my mind that there is call it a manual, but there is a manual that exists that basically gives instructions on lycanthropic transformation.
Yeah.
So with that said, what we talked about the other day, or what we talked about yesterday, like you can tell a lot about the perpetrator by the victim.
Yep.
You know how I broke down there's like when I look at or when I hear cases about people being killed or whatever, or livestock or whatever the case may be, that it basically falls down into two basic categories: acts of predation and acts of bloodlust.
Mm-hmm.
Or I throw a third category in there: act of revenge.
Yeah.
So with that said, I believe that the reason there's like even misidentification among dogmen is just quite simply there's different type of dogmen. Like I said, this is just my theory I'm throwing out there. I think that there are what I call natural occurring dogmen, like dogmen that's just what they are. They're a species of apex predator, upright canid that have probably been around for Lord knows how long, how many thousands of years. I think that possibly there is another group following, the old European lore of the people that transform into some form of a canine.
Mm.
And I think there is a third group that falls under the category of this, like this manual that I'm talking about. They would fall in this category because these are dark arts. This is black magic shit right here.
Yeah.
So whenever, a person, I'm just putting myself in the position of a person who's going there anyway. We going down that path, that's some dark shit to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I hear of cases where there was really no predation, they just were just killed, just murdered, whether it be animal or human, like an act of bloodlust, I think that the perpetrator is a lichen or a dogman, whatever, that transformed itself through dark arts.
Yep.
And they're acting out acts of bloodlust, not natural predation.
Yeah, there's a book that exists that you can, if you look the book up, you can look the book up, but you cannot find a physical copy of the book. The book was taken out of existence, almost like what they tried to do with like Abby Hoffman, steal this book, or like the Anarchist Cookbook and stuff like that. But there's a book written by Anton LaVey.
That's what. See, I didn't want to go into it. I don't know if you got the notes right or if you already knew about it. I didn't want to go into it.
Yeah.
But basically, this is what happened. Was it the Satanic Bible or the Satanic Verses? Whatever book Anton LaVey had made, right? Oh, okay. So he came out with this freaking manual, like
how to become a lycanthrope.
Right. I don't. I didn't want to say the name because I don't want people going out trying to find his manuscript and actually find it.
It is impossible to find. I mean, maybe on the dark web.
Because see, this is what happened. He, the publishing company who printed the Satanic Verses, they were gonna republish the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he had this manuscript. Okay. So he submitted it to the publishing company to either print it as a separate book or as a addition to the Satanic Bible, the Satanic Verses, whatever book he read, right?
Right.
The publishing company refused. That's the only thing they said, like, we can't print this because it works.
Mm.
But nobody ever knew what happened to the original manuscript that he submitted to his publishing company.
Right. Yeah.
So, and the source had told me that, I trust them. And the fact that you're telling me the exact same shit, like, you know what I mean? Two separate people, and we're saying the exact same thing. Even down to who
that's
did
a rabbit hole.
LaVey.
That's a rabbit hole no one wants to go down, to be honest with you. Like, it's a weird one. But yeah, I heard about that book, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years ago. And, I kind of dismissed it, and I kind of didn't. But, we don't know. There's, and like you said, people would scoff at your idea of how you feel. And that's why you emphasized on that. You emphasized, this is my theory. This is what I believe, that dogmen, there are dogmen that are born dogmen and that have evolved, have always been dogmen. And then there are the ones that follow under the European, and then this one. And people would scoff at that, but how do we know? We don't know, so there shouldn't be any scoffing at anything. It's an idea, it's theory, but with that, there's actual, there is evidence of that book, and you can't dismiss something when there is even a minuscule amount of evidence. So it's definitely a spooky thing.
Let's just take Anubis, for example, right?
Mm.
that might be the biggest thing sitting under our nose, right there is Anubis. Because if you ever noticed that, like, any depiction of Anubis, any statue of Anubis, any sculpture of Anubis, do you ever notice how they look exactly the same? There's like no variation whatsoever.
No, they're always very, very symmetrical to looking exactly perfect. Yeah.
So I mean, like, think about it realistically, right? If you were a sculptor, or if you were a sculptor or whatever, and you were tasked with building painting a painting of Anubis, or doing a sculpture of Anubis, right? It might explain why everything was so on point.
Yeah.
You know, Anubis may not have been the best model subject, if you know what I'm saying. Like, your life depended on getting this shit, like, perfect.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because if you didn't, you know what I mean, you might get fucked up for real. I'm just saying, like, it's just too much of a, I don't believe in coincidences. And the fact that every depiction of Anubis, like, there's no variation. Like, it looks like it wasn't coming from a person's mind, but from literally something they're physically looking at right in front of them.
Yeah. Something. Yeah. It's there's got to be some truth for it to always look exactly the same. Anywhere you see it, any way you see it, it's always the same. So, yep. Listen, we're coming up on about 80 minutes of this. I don't want to not be able to put it up, but is there anything that you'd like to say to, and don't hang up when we end the interview, because I want to talk to you for a little bit after. Is there anything that you'd like to say to the audience before we end?
Just my message always, it doesn't matter where you are, urban, rural, city, country, doesn't matter. Be vigilant. Always be watching your six. Pay attention to your surroundings. I mean, you need to do that anyway, but always pay attention to your surroundings. You know, if it don't feel right, it's not right. If you're in the woods, anyway, check some trees. Always be looking at the trees. Watch for shadows that don't belong. You know what I mean? Just pay attention, basically. That's all. Just pay attention.
Exactly. Last thing, because Preston is, I want to key on this. Preston is older than myself, and, like, he's not stopping researching. So, just always keep researching. And it doesn't mean just listening to things. It means picking up a book, reading a book, taking different ideas. So just never stop researching. That's how I want to end this. And use you as an example, because you haven't stopped. You took your retirement and you turned it into a research, and keep up the good work, my friend. Really, please.
Oh, Jeff, and as always, man, thank you, man. Your hospitality, your show, man, is so much appreciated. And like I said, man, you help people, man. Like, if nothing else, people being allowed to just vent and tell their stories, man, it helps the people, and it helps a person, because you never know, man. Like, hypothetically, I'm gonna end this, but you never know when a person may be hearing something like, "Oh man, that was right down the road from me."
Right.
And it may either jog a memory or just let them know, like, they gotta watch their six a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? So that's all I got, Jeff.
All right, brother. It was great talking to you. I'll talk to you very soon.
Okay, Jeff. Thank you.
Wow, what a great interview. These are the interviews that I like. I like to meet different people, different views, different theories. With that, I hope you guys enjoyed this interview as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. And be kind to each other, guys. We're the ones that are looking out for each other. No one out there, no one bigger is going to look out for us. We need to look out for each other. And May the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He lead us down that path that we call life. Till tomorrow, my friends. Until tomorrow.